All right, let's jump right into this explainer, because today we're unpacking a story that is just absolutely unprecedented. We're looking at how a 12-year-old boy in Lagos, Nigeria, managed to reverse engineer WWE mythology to completely shatter a 24-year-old law of nature. And listen, we aren't just talking about some kid practicing moves in his bedroom mirror. No way. We're talking about someone who treated professional wrestling like a hard science. He literally tested the physical grammar of a performance from the inside out. He was obsessed with figuring out exactly how a human body becomes this undeniable symbol of inevitability. It sounds kind of absurd when you really think about it, right? Applying the strict, unforgiven logic of physics and biomechanics to a theatrical sport built on pure emotion. But honestly, that exact obsession changed everything.
To really wrap our heads around the massive geographical and psychological scale of this whole journey, we have to start with one very precise, pretty staggering number: 11,777. So fast forward 16 years from that kid in Lagos, and this number represents a huge crowd of strangers packed into a St. Louis arena. Now, the absolutely crucial context you need here is that this happened right in the middle of a commercial break. Dead air. The cameras are off, the lights are dimmed, and it's that time when everyone usually checks their phones or runs to grab a hot dog. It is literally the hardest time in the world to get a crowd's attention, let alone command it completely.
But when the production crew decided to test out Oba Femi's music during that dead air, something absolutely wild happened. Every single one of those 11,777 strangers stood up in complete unison and performed his storyboarded entrance choreography to a totally empty stage. Femi wasn't even booked on the show that night. He was hundreds of miles away. But the fans, they didn't care. They hit every single beat, every pose perfectly in sync. I mean, this moment alone proves he had already transcended being just a guy on a TV screen. He was a symbol, a character that the audience carried right there in their own minds, actively transferring their belief to a man who wasn't even in the building. Now, to fully appreciate why that empty stage moment is such a big deal, we have to talk about the ghost Femi would eventually have to face at WrestleMania 42 in 2026, Brock Lesnar. This is a guy who had literally absorbed over 2 decades of wrestling mythology. Back in 2002, he was the youngest champion in company history. Then, in 2014, he does the unthinkable. He breaks The Undertaker's sacred 21-0 WrestleMania streak. Lesnar wasn't just a wrestler anymore, he was walking architecture, a complete force of nature. Basically, the final boss, whose whole aura was designed to make anyone standing across from him look desperately small. So what we're witnessing here is a massive clash of eras. For 24 years, WWE used this very specific, highly manufactured template to build their monsters. You take a scary, legitimate athlete, strip away their humanity, and have a silver-tongued advocate do all the talking on the microphone to build the hype. It was a proven formula that worked every time. But Oba Femi, he completely threw that rulebook out the window. He didn't adopt some terrifying fake nickname. He brought his authentic Yoruba name right from home. He didn't use a manager. He self-storyboarded his entire presentation. He forced the global audience to come to him on his own terms, totally smashing that quarter-century-old mold into pieces. In the build-up to their massive WrestleMania showdown, Lesnar's legendary advocate, Paul Heyman, laid out a very deliberate psychological trap. Standing dead center in the ring, Heyman grabbed the mic and methodically listed every single legendary challenger who had tried to slay the beast and failed. Goldberg, Braun Strowman, Dean Ambrose, Bobby Lashley, AJ Styles, John Cena. This wasn't just a list, it was a psychological blueprint for exactly how to lose. Heyman was purposely baiting the rookie, basically demanding this unhinged, angry response to prove that Femi was just another hot-headed kid walking straight to his own execution. So the real question is, how do you actually respond to a trap like that? Because if we look at history, if you show up angry, grab a microphone, and scream about how you're going to destroy him, the legend just absorbs that energy and grows even bigger. Anger and aggression are the exact fuel a veteran like Brock Lesnar runs on. Every single superstar on Heyman's list fell for that exact framing. They got super emotional, felt disrespected, tried to outshout the monster, and just ended up as another emotional victim. They played right into the hands of a 24-year-old machine designed to break you before the bell even rings. But Femi's response was just brilliant. Stillness. Absolute stillness. He stood at ringside, staring up at the ring, and just absorbed the provocation like it was a light breeze. He didn't flinch, didn't grab a mic, he just watched. And you could literally see the frustration building in Heyman as his whole verbal masterclass hit a solid brick wall.
It proved that Femi's absolute silence, that terrifying quiet confidence of a guy who has already settled the debate in his own head, was impenetrable armor. It completely deflected the ghost Heyman had spent 24 years building. All right, so the opening bell finally rings at WrestleMania 42, and the tension in Allegiant Stadium with 50,000 screaming fans is literally suffocating. Lesnar immediately lunges forward for his standard, brutal lockup. For over 2 decades, this first physical clash is where Lesnar establishes who's boss. It's this kinetic, bone-jarring impact meant to tell his opponent, you are way out of your league. But when Lesnar pushed with everything he had, Femi didn't budge, not an inch. He absorbs the impact of a 280-pound freak of nature without taking a single step back. It turned into this dead stalemate, and for 10 agonizing seconds, you could feel 50,000 people instantly recalibrating their entire reality. Now, to really understand how a rookie grounds himself against a 24-year veteran with that kind of freakish strength, we need to leave the wrestling ring completely. We have to look at a deeply personal, hidden measurement that shaped Femi's entire life long before he ever stepped foot in WWE. And that measurement is exactly 25 centimeters. Think about that for a second. 25 centimeters. It's barely the length of a standard ruler. But in the world of elite track and field, that microscopic, tiny distance is the crushing difference between achieving your ultimate destiny and watching your entire world fall apart. That 25 centimeters represents a totally heartbreaking gap. It's the exact distance that Isaac Odegbison, which is Oba Femi's real name, missed the Olympic shot put qualifying standard by. He threw an incredible personal best of 20.85 meters, but the strict Olympic requirement was 21.10 meters. He chased that tiny gap through an entire grueling season, pushed his body to the absolute limit, but he just couldn't close it. Missing his lifelong dream by the length of a ruler forced him to put down the shot put and pivot back to a dream he'd quietly held onto since he was a 12-year-old kid in Lagos. But here's the thing. That brutal, uncompromising discipline he learned in track and field, that is exactly what forged him for WWE. Years earlier, when his college track coach totally abandoned him after he'd moved 4,000 miles to Tennessee, he didn't give up, he didn't pack his bags. Instead, he spent months completely alone in a dead silent gym. He'd prop his phone up against a plastic water bottle and just record himself throwing 16 pounds of solid steel over and over and over. He'd spend hours reviewing that grainy footage, tirelessly hunting for his own microscopic errors and forcing himself to self-correct. And this obsessive cycle of self-correction, it was shockingly effective. By acting as his own demanding coach, sitting in his dorm, breaking down joint angles frame by frame, he improved his throwing distance by a massive 3.6 meters in just 2 months. To put that into perspective, improving by 3.6 meters in elite shot put in just 8 weeks is astronomical. It almost never happens. He completely shattered his university school record, proving that his hyper-analytical, error-hunting mindset wasn't just a cool theory, it was a literal weapon. But when Femi brought that exact same obsessive, error-free planning into WWE's developmental brand NXT, he hit a massive roadblock. NXT head Shawn Michaels, literally one of the greatest performers ever, took Femi's highly mathematical match scripts and tore them to shreds. Michaels dropped this profound piece of advice on the rookie. He said, flawless execution looks like choreography, and choreography destroys belief, and belief is the only currency that matters. I mean, wow. Let that sink in for a second. Belief is the only currency that matters. That one piece of advice required a massive psychological shift for Femi. Imagine your entire life being built exclusively on eliminating physical errors, from the shot put circle to the weight room. Now, all of a sudden, you have to learn to find the beauty in the mistakes. You have to let a misstep happen, let the live chaos unfold, and just trust the organic story happening in the ring. Embracing that vulnerability, shifting from a cold, calculating technician to an emotional storyteller, is exactly what fueled his record-setting 273-day reign as NXT North American Champion. Okay, so let's bring that profound lesson right back to the chaos of WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar, feeling the match slipping away, relies on his veteran instincts and unleashes his most soul-crushing sequence, Suplex City. It's just physically grueling. Lesnar drives Femi shoulder first into the steel ring post, then hits 3 massive, neck-snapping German suplexes back-to-back. The whole stadium gasps. Everyone thinks it's over. But Femi, who has studied Lesnar's matches since he was a kid, willingly let that immense physical damage land. He took the pain because he knew exactly where the sequence was going.
When Lesnar finally hoisted Femi up for his legendary finishing move, the F5, the trap was officially sprung. Femi treated the impact identically to the mechanics of a shot put throw. Okay, stick with me here, because the physics of this are mind-blowing. In shot put, keeping your rotation smooth is everything. If you lose it, the throw is ruined. Femi recognized the violent, spinning downward force of the F5 as the precise moment the left side deliberately stops in a throwing motion. So by bracing and arresting that momentum on impact, the kinetic force released purely forward. He didn't lose his rotation. He absorbed the violent stop against the mat, used that transferred energy, and popped straight back up to his feet, completely unfazed. 4 minutes and 45 seconds. That was the incredibly precise, absolutely shocking runtime of the whole match. After completely short-circuiting Lesnar's psychology and absorbing his biggest physical weapon, Femi hit his own thunderous finisher, the fall from grace. And with 50,000 fans losing their minds in sheer disbelief, he cleanly pinned Brock Lesnar right in the middle of the ring. A shockwave went through the stadium as Femi snapped 2 decades of terrifying muscle memory in under 5 minutes. It was a total surgical dismantling of a living legend. Now, in wrestling, a sport that is entirely about milking the crowd's reaction, almost anyone else would have lingered. They'd climb the turnbuckles, pound their chest, and soak in the deafening cheers after a career-defining win like that. But Femi, he immediately rolled out and walked away. He expertly read the room and understood the profound psychology of the moment. The transfer of mythology was already done. Standing there begging for cheers would be asking for confirmation of something that simply didn't need confirming anymore. It was the ultimate power move. That ring belonged to someone else now. Meanwhile, back inside the ring, a totally surreal scene is unfolding. Stripped of his invincibility, Brock Lesnar slowly takes off his MMA gloves and unlaces his wrestling boots. He leaves them carefully arranged right in the center of the canvas, which, in combat sports, is the universal, emotional sign that the war is officially over. Beside him, a weeping Paul Heyman gently guides the broken giant up the ramp in what looked like a completely genuine, permanent retirement. The theater of surrender was just absolute. The torch was officially passed. But wait, because the cold, calculating WWE machine, it set one final, devastating trap. That passing of the torch was a complete illusion. On May 18th, out of nowhere, Lesnar returned from the shadows. He ambushed Femi from behind, blindsiding the new champ with multiple vicious F5s. This brutal attack proved that the emotional retirement scene at WrestleMania was a total con job. Those boots left in the ring were nothing but a theatrical prop, a distraction so Lesnar could aggressively claw back a massive chunk of that sacred mythology by force. Now, Femi's psychological response to this massive betrayal brings up a really fascinating comparison. Femi openly models his WWE persona on the Thanos archetype from the Marvel movies. He carries himself with this terrifying, quiet inevitability. He talks about his wins not as athletic contests, but as unavoidable events of destiny that the universe simply demands. He is inevitable. But when we look at how he handled Lesnar's betrayal, we spot one massive, crucial difference between the comic book villain and the Nigerian powerhouse. See, the fatal flaw in a classic villain like Thanos is his absolute, blinding arrogance. He is so utterly convinced of his own flawless logic that he simply cannot recognize when a plan fails, and he violently refuses to course correct. Oba Femi is the exact opposite. Sure, he projects the aura of Thanos, but his real life is defined by complete humility to the process. This is the guy who sets up a camera in an empty gym, relentlessly hunts for his own structural errors, and spends every agonizing second fixing them. He actually thrives on finding his own weakness. So what the world truly witnessed at WrestleMania wasn't just the birth of a new monster, it was the king and the boy existing perfectly inside the exact same body. The king's terrifying certainty allowed him to walk into Allegiant Stadium without even blinking at the ghost standing across the ring. But make no mistake about it was the 12-year-old boy's obsessive, lonely self-correction in those empty Tennessee gyms that gave him the willpower to pop back up from that F5. The certainty got him there, but the self-correction is what got him up. As Femi heads toward the huge Clash in Italy event, totally laser-focused on reclaiming his stolen mythology from Lesnar, he's undoubtedly going to close that gap. But looking at this whole phenomenal story of reverse engineering success, it really forces us to ask a profound question about ourselves. When our own carefully laid plans fail, and we are finally brave enough to identify our most glaring errors, what painted circle are we willing to step back into?